Hey YouTube, Alex here, and in today's video I want to talk about the subject computer-based work, and these are really some tips that I think should be helpful for you if you are considering working abroad, working on a computer. These are kind of cursory tips. Some of you may find them to be pretty basic, but I think they're great just to kind of review and to consider before you look at the idea of working in another country. First thing I think you're going to need here is you're going to need a reliable computer. So you don't want to start off by borrowing some 5-10-year-old laptop from your Uncle Steve. You really want to have a computer that's going to be reliable and that you can expect to be reliable for at least 1 to 2 years. Especially if you're on a budget, you don't want to have to break into your budget a few months into your trip to buy an expensive piece of equipment that you're not going to necessarily understand the return policy. You're not going to understand perhaps what to do if something goes wrong. You could research, but perhaps you accidentally buy a model that's only available in that region or in that country. These are some of the things that you want to consider before you start looking at doing computer work. You want to go with something that you can rely on for a while, something that's up to date, something that's got the latest software, something that's got a decent camera on it in case you need to do Zoom meetings or you need to do some kind of video chatting, something that is going to last you a while, because you don't know exactly what kind of unexpected expenses come up. You should have a general idea of your budget before you go about doing something like this, but it can be a real budget buster to have to replace expensive equipment outside of your home country. Next thing I'm going to mention here is that you're going to need a reliable internet connection. You don't want to be in a situation where you have all these plans to, say, teach English online, and you select your destination and you get there and then you find out your internet's not very good. Now all of a sudden you're having to cancel meetings, you're having to readjust your budget, you're going to have to do a lot of things you didn't think you had to do just because you end up in a place without solid internet. You may end up having to buy another plane ticket and go through more hassle and potentially miss working hours just to get to a different location or different city, different country, different area where the internet is solid and reliable. So definitely pre-plan where you're going. If you have to work online, to include a sort of plan for internet services. You want to make sure that you've got a setup where when you get there, you know what provider you're going to use, you know how much it's going to cost you, you know expected speeds, not just what their ads say, but also do some research. Look on Reddit. Does anybody else use that provider? What kind of service quality do you get when you're using them for internet? These kinds of things are really important because you're not going to necessarily find a provider that you're familiar with overseas. I know in my case, to use my home provider when I was with AT&T, they wanted $10 a day to have my service overseas, and that's really expensive, especially if you're looking at a multi-month trip or moving abroad. You don't want to be paying $300-400 a month, because I'm sure they'll raise it soon eventually, just to have that service. So that being said, you don't want to go for the cheapest option either. If there's a variety of price points and tiers and you're relying on a solid internet connection to work, don't go for the cheapest of the cheap. In many cases, the best internet connection in any given country outside of developed countries is reasonable. You're not going to spend, for the most part, you let me know if there's exceptions, but you're probably not going to spend $100 a month going with a local provider. I found at a lot of the places I go, I usually spend around 20 to 30 US dollars a month on internet and data, and I always go for the best provider, get uncapped if I can, and I haven't really had any major issues that I couldn't prepare for, if that makes any sense. I really like, and just to kind of interject a personal story in here, I really like to go to the Philippines, but I have had some challenges with internet reliability in the Philippines. So until I can make a plan to sort that out. Maybe Starlink addresses that. The Philippines will mostly be a vacation spot for me. Not going to say that isn't going to be different for you. You may go to a different place, or they may have updated the internet since I visited in a given area. So definitely do your research, especially on some of these more off the beaten path places that some of you may be interested in. Next thing I'm going to mention here is you want to set up your payment methods in your home country. You don't want to get to the country that you're going to, or the region you're going to, and then attempt to set up payment methods. If you have some kind of work schedule you expect to be paid every couple of weeks or once a month or upon completion of a project, have that set up. Have it connected to your home bank. Do all these things before you leave. In case there's some kind of error, you have to call the bank and address something, then you're able to do so. But you don't want to have to deal with the different time zones, and potentially they're having to mail you something internationally. It becomes a real big hassle to do some of these things during your trip. So set it up such that you can get paid and transfer your payments to a method that you can access your money, so you're not worried about, well, I've gotten paid, but how am I going to get the cash? That shouldn't be crossing your mind when you are, in your destination country. So some more extra tips. Distinguish between your work time and your free time. If you have a job like editing video or writing software or web development, there's a difference between watching YouTube videos that are relevant to your skill set and just goofing off and watching entertaining videos. Make sure that when you are scheduling your time, you want to plan ahead to plan your work schedule out before you get to any given place. Then make sure that you know kind of what your work schedule is going to be like. Look at their time zone difference. Look at perhaps, just for example, holidays, different kinds of things that might come up and interfere with your plans. Because if you have your work schedule dictates you need to be in a meeting at 2 p.m., well, make sure it's not a major holiday. You might find there's a parade going down your street at 2 p.m. It sounds kind of odd, but you'd be surprised at some of the things that come up when you're not used to the country that you're in and you don't really know all these extra fine details about living there. And make sure that you don't get behind because you're having such a good time. It's really easy to get into like a party mode when you're traveling abroad, or a recreational kind of mindset. And some of that's good. It's important to have fun. It's important to use time in your trips to enjoy yourself, but make sure you don't get into this sort of mindset or attitude of like, oh, I can just have a good time all the time and my work will still get done and bills will get paid. It's really important to have a lot of discipline and to make sure you're getting the things done that you need to get done before you have a good time, and also that you're sticking to your budget. Just because the currency is different, you don't want to, even if you are earning money, you don't want to get in the habit of blowing money, getting into different bad habits that cause you to make poor financial decisions that could affect you, because it's not as easy to get yourself out of a bind in another country than it is in your home country. I do want to interrupt with a sort of blip about visas. Make sure that anytime you are looking into the idea of working in another country, that you follow all the visa laws. Make sure that you have the legal right to work in that country. I'm not an attorney. This is not legal advice, but it's really a bad idea to think that you're going to do this and you're not going to have to follow the local rules and precautions, regulations, because in fact, from my understanding, in many countries, it is a pretty serious punishment to be working without permission. So make sure you follow the laws, make sure you follow the rules, regulations, and respect what the locals have kind of set up as their system. The next tip that I'm going to mention here is consider the time zone differences preemptively. So if you're used to working a certain schedule and you're going to have to adjust for meetings, for collaboration, for different kinds of needs of your clients, business partners, etc., then kind of preemptively be aware of that. Take a look at the time zone in your destination. Go ahead and start emailing the people you work with. Hey, I'm looking at this country to be living and working in for various reasons, personal reasons, whatever. And ask them, how can we go about shifting our schedule around, or is it possible for you to move your schedule around such that we can meet at a time that is convenient to both you and to myself. Of course, you want to, if they're your clients, you want to do the best you can to come to them as far as their needs and not necessarily dictate the terms. You really want to not make this harder on them than it has to be, if it has to be hard on them. Of course, it depends on your business, it depends on their needs, on your needs, hours, destination, country, etc. But definitely take a look at that and consider that you're going to be potentially in a very different time zone. You may be in Southeast Asia, you may be in Eastern Europe, they may be in Southeast Asia, they may be in Eastern Europe. It kind of depends on all these factors, and knowing about those moving parts before you go into the situation I think will help you avoid schedule misses and mishaps like that can be really detrimental to your business or to your finances, to your work, to whatever it may be. Final tip I'm going to mention here is I suggest that you bring equipment with you. So any kind of computer related equipment that you need in terms of working on the computer in any capacity, like memory cards, hard drives, monitors, cables, adapters, all these things you should be bringing with you before you leave your home country. And I'll explain why. So first off, you don't know where to find these things in the country you're headed to unless you've done quite a bit of research. And a lot of these countries will have big stores, big box stores, something, a place that will carry some of these things, but one of these places may not be down the street from you. It may involve sitting in traffic. It may involve finding out, this place has got no stock on that item, so I've got to go to their other location. But if you're in your home country, you probably have access to Amazon or some kind of e-commerce. Get these things ahead of time. Find out what you need. Find out all the equipment that it's going to take for you to be successful and to be productive, and order all of that. Have all of that packed up and ready to go in a secure fashion where it's not going to get damaged. And in some cases, I like to carry my valuables in my carry-on just so it's not going through who knows where on its way to where I'm going, and I can really feel like I keep a better eye on my stuff, really valuables if they are in my carry-on luggage. So just think about these things. Think about the expenses of some of these items that it can be somewhat unpredictable. I mean, I've found that in some places that I've gone, I can get last year's version of the item for like 30% more money, and I don't want that. I want the latest version at the best price. So that was something I noticed for the Osmo Pocket 2 is everywhere I went in Colombia, it was several $100s more to get the latest version if I could even find it. In many cases, it was more expensive to have last year's version. I checked a lot of different shops, and so I ultimately ended up ordering the Osmo Pocket 2 on Amazon, and they sent it to my friend's apartment in Bogota, which was really convenient. But if I'd ordered it in the States, I would have paid much less in tax. So that's something else to consider, is that some of these countries that you go to, they're going to have value-added taxes to imported goods where you see what you think is a great deal on a laptop for $1,000, but they're going to charge you an additional 20% or 25% just because it wasn't manufactured in that country. And even then, the price could still be marked up at $1,000. It might be a laptop that's $700 in the States. You got to also take a look at the variances in supply. I know we're having some supply chain issues in the US this year, but typically it's been a very convenient place to be a consumer. I think it will probably get back to that way in the future, but it's going to take some time. But certainly be aware of that. Be aware of all the different little pieces and things you need. If it's really a niche adapter type of a thing, you may have a really hard time finding it outside of your home country. You may have to go to a half dozen stores. You may have to make some phone calls, have hotel staff translate for you. There's just a lot that can really go into that. So I hope this video has been helpful. Definitely let me know what you think down in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll talk to you soon.